This is my mother. Her name is Mandy Mentor, and I'm going to be interviewing her about the Oka crisis. So, how long have you lived in Kahnawake?
I lived in Kahnawake all my life, since I've been born.
What was your life like in 1990? Like, where did you live? Where were you working? How old were you?
Okay, well, I lived here in this house in Kahnawake, and I was 22 years old, and I was working at the Caisse Populaire in Kahnawake. Actually, I might have been a little bit older. 24, sorry. And I was working as a bank teller, which was my first job, and I had been working there for 2 years when the Oka crisis happened.
Did you have any kids?
I had one daughter at the time. She was 2, and her name is Lauren.
Okay, so what were the events that led up to the Oka crisis?
Well,
what was happening in town?
Yeah. Prior to that day, on July 11th, 1990, there was a situation happening in the Pines in Oka, which is a community not far from here, a community of Mohawk people. And all that spring, they were protesting the city of Oka because they had wanted to build, expand their golf club into the wooded pine area, which was a burial ground of their people. So this had started in the spring of 1990, and eventually it had led up to the culmination of events. And on July 11th, the people in our community had agreed to support the people there, and they had made at that time there was going to be a raid on their community in Oka and Kanesatake, and so our people here in this community had joined forces with them and had agreed to block the Mersey Bridge. And they had done a blockade of a similar blockade earlier, either in that year or in a couple of years prior to that, but it was only for like one day or a few hours. So this, I think they had agreed to do probably along the same lines, but it had turned out to become something much bigger than just, a one-day event.
So what was it like to live in Kahnawake, like to be stuck in here for months?
Okay, so what had happened on that day, July 11th, 1990? Like I said, I was working at the Caisse Populaire as a bank teller, and so I kind of was involved in knowing a lot of what was happening in the community, because as a teller, people came and went every day because they needed money. And since we're the only financial institution in this community, they relied on us a lot for, getting money, cashing checks, and things like that. And so the day of the Oka crisis, our manager came in, and it was, he had said to us that they're blocking the bridge, and so we were a little bit surprised, but didn't know what was going to happen. So it kind of felt like it might have been a regular day, that when you came into work, maybe at the end of the day things would be over, and things were going to work themselves out. But as the days went on, it became more apparent that things weren't going to be normal that summer. And we were living in this community where not only we had blocked the bridge so nobody can come into the community, but it also became there was a point where we couldn't get out either, because the surrounding communities were not happy with the events that took place and the fact that the bridge was blocked, and it inconvenienced a lot of people. And so they were very unhappy with the people in our community. Things that transpired over the weeks in neighboring Chateauguay, for example, where at night they would burn effigies of Mohawks on sticks, to symbolize their rage with the people. And so if we tried to go out, we were at risk of being threatened and things like that. So the first couple of weeks were kind of fun, because my daughter at the time, my older daughter was young, and the roads were all blocked. The big highways were blocked. The highways to the bridge, which is a big, we have a big highway here with a big bridge that crosses into Montreal. So we would go on our bike and ride all the way down the highway, and there wasn't a car in sight. So that was kind of fun. But then, as the days went by and the weeks went by without you know, no cars being able to come in or delivery trucks, then we started to run out of food. And so that wasn't that fun. And so people had to find ways to get out of the community to try and just to get, basic food and groceries and things like that. So what we would do was, there was a lot of people that had boats because there's a marina here. And so we would go down to the marina and take a boat for the day and go to Dorval. That was the closest area that we were able to go shopping at. And there's a mall there, which isn't far. You could walk to the mall. And at the time, I think it was one of the negotiators, or maybe I forget, John Chiera, I forget what his role is in the government at the time, but he was, on one of those parties or something like that. And he was involved in the crisis, and apparently that he owned a dock in Dorval where we were able to go and dock the boats. People docked their boats there, and we would go out for the day, go get groceries, or maybe just go to the city, because after a while it became really monotonous, being stuck, and you couldn't go anywhere in a car, you couldn't go out. And so, we always took our daughter with us, because if anything ever happened, we didn't want to get stuck or separated from her. And there was always a threat that things could happen. And I know after a while, things did get heated, even in Dorval, because people started to find out that that's where we were going. And so, there were a lot of news stories where people were going there and trying to get back on the boat to come, and they were, bothering the women and the children and trying to block them from getting on their boat and coming back to town. So that became really scary, and it never happened to us, but there was always a threat that something could happen, or if people saw you in Montreal and they recognized you, that they wouldn't be very kind to you. So we did that a few times, and like I said, it became monotonous. And this was July 11th, so it was July, August, the whole summer where we were just stuck here, and we didn't do anything and we didn't go anywhere. So things became harder to come by. Food was getting scarce. There was no more milk in the local grocery stores on the shelf. No milk or no bread or diapers or anything like that. And so we did that a couple of times. Like I said, we would go over to Dorval. But what else had happened in that summer?
Did your family support what was going on, or what did you think of it?
Well, let me see now. For example, personally, I wasn't that happy with, the way things were handled, and the fact that, we weren't consulted and you felt trapped, in the community. I felt things maybe could have been handled much better. But of course you supported the whole idea, because that's how it is in this community. Maybe not everybody agrees with things at the same time, but when it comes to, the outside government trying to, push certain things on our people, then that's when everybody, comes together for a common good. So we might not have supported or agreed with the blockade, but, we went along with it. And I had family that were working in a lot of different areas of the community. For example, my aunt Linda, who's very close to me, she worked for social service, and my father, at the time, he was working at the local hospital, and my uncle worked for public works in the community. So they were all very involved in different aspects of what was happening. For example, my father, he was in charge of maintenance, and he had a lot to do with emergency management. At the time, he used to be a volunteer firefighter. So he had some training. So he was always, very well established and respected in the community. So when it came time to that, they looked up to him to help put a plan in place. And I remember hearing stories that, they said if there was going to be, blood, shed in the community, because they were very worried about that, and I think people were willing to go that far. That he was one of the main people that would help to organize the hospital if anything should happen. So my family was involved in that way, and like I said, I worked at the Caisse Populaire, so I knew the coming and goings of monetary, what was happening. And for example, where I worked, we had no money either coming in because the Garda trucks, or at the time it was secure, they couldn't come into the community and deliver money. So our manager, and not myself, but he would take like one or another employee with him. They would take these boats and go to Dorval, take a taxi, go downtown, and they would actually pick up money. And then they would bring it back on a boat, and it was quite scary because they just had it in duffel bags. And it wasn't very secure, but they managed to do this for the whole summer. And I think that had a lot to do with keeping the town moving or going, because we still had money coming in. And I think if they would have stopped that right from the beginning and saying, okay, well, Secure can't come and we don't have any money, this probably would have ended a lot sooner, I believe, because there would have been no money, and there were no ATMs either in 1990. Not here anyway. There were ATMs outside, but we didn't have, like I said, any other bank here or financial institution. So people relied solely on our financial institution to keep things going. So that's how it worked. People went by boat. They brought supplies. They brought money. And like I said, I know people that worked behind the scenes. They weren't directly involved in the crisis or in the negotiations or anything like that, but behind the scenes they were involved in different aspects of the community.
So you weren't involved in the blockade, right?
No.
Why not?
Well, I didn't, because I had a child, and I'm not very politically, I guess you could say, motivated person. I don't really take sides when it comes to protests and things like that, because there are other people that have I guess that special, like, I would say, they like to be involved in that, and I don't really, and especially where I work, I don't really become involved in those types of political, I guess you could say, activists, in terms of protesting and things like that. I try to stay neutral when it comes to any type of, and everything here that happens, it's always, very political, so I don't really would go and say be on the front lines, but I guess we all do our part by, working in the community and, keeping this community going during any type of crisis.
So did you end up staying in Kahnawake the whole summer?
Well, I stayed right up until it was, I think, August 28th, and that was the day that there was going to be a mass exodus of people that was organized by, at the time, the head of the community service, and he had made arrangements with, say, government people, things like that, police or whatever, to have an escort of people over the bridge. And but we had also had the chance to leave by boat. So that morning I took my younger daughter, my older daughter at the time, who was 2, and my father and aunt. They encouraged me to go because they were, like I said, they knew behind the scenes, and they had heard of things that could happen, and they thought maybe there would be bloodshed and things like this, because the army was threatening. Now the government said they were sending the army in, and they were going to stop, this blocking of the bridge, and it was a serious threat because there were helicopters always flying overhead all summer. There were blockade. Now the army was at the perimeter of our community, with big, army trucks you don't really see around here, like tankers you would see like in Iraq or something like that. So they had them all over the community, so people knew it was real and it was coming. And our people said here that they weren't going to back down. So my father, like I said, he worked in the hospital, and my aunt said, we don't want you to stay, we want you to go and take your daughter because we want her to be safe. She's really small and we don't want her here. So, but we didn't have a car, I didn't have a car to leave by myself, and luckily I have an aunt at the time. She was living just over the border near Plattsburgh, no, more near Champlain, and she could come and get me. It wasn't a problem, and so we arranged. I went on this boat, and she picked me up in Dorval. No, it was in Point Claire now. They had to move the dock from Dorval to Point Claire. So she came and she picked me up at the. No, we went to the marina. We went to the marina and she picked me up. We went to the marina and we got on the boat. And we went on a boat, and when we got off in Point Claire, and she took me to the high school. I think it was like John Rennie, because you had to go and register, because they were keeping track of where everybody was. So then you had to tell them like where you were staying. So we went and we did that. We went to the high school, and then as we were there waiting for my aunt was in Moores. She lived in Moores. It's near Champlain. So when we got over on the boat, everything was okay. She brought me to the school, and as we got to the school, there were televisions on. We went in the school gym, and we could see that there had been this there was a cars that were waiting. Like I said, there was something that was organized. And so there was going to be a mass exodus by car over the bridge. And what had happened was it went really wrong. And everyone believes to this day that, it was organized. People waited in their cars, but that somebody let the other people know on the other side of the bridge. And they waited so long that what happened was there was a big crowd that had gotten on the other side of the bridge. And there was construction at the time that was happening, but the construction had stopped for that summer because of the blockade. So there were big mounds of dirt and rocks and things like that. And what had happened was they waited so long that this massive crowd got there. And as these people left in their cars, it was mostly women and children and babies and elderly, really elderly. As they crossed over the bridge, people that were there took the big rocks and they threw it at the cars, but it was really bad. All their windows were busted in their cars, and people were screaming. There was an elderly man that got hurt and later died from his injuries. So things like that had happened. And these people eventually got to the same school, and their cars were just finished. Like they had no windows left, and there was glass everywhere, and everybody was crying and screaming and everything. So I know, like, my aunt had waited around to see if everybody was okay, and then we left and made sure, she asked if anybody needed a ride or anything like that. And then we went to Moores, and I stayed there about a week. And so that's what we did. And then the blockade ended just around, sometime during that week, and then we were able to come back. So I forget the exact date. I know the date that we left was August 28th, but I don't remember the exact date that they took the barricade down. It had to be like early September that it came down here anyway, and then people were able to come in and out. But things were rough even for a couple of years after, because there were a lot of people that were angry. There was a lot of healing anyway to do after the blockade.
So has this experience affected your life in any way today?
I wouldn't say it affected me. It's just something you remember, something that happened, and you try to, learn from things that happened in the past. But I wouldn't say it affected me in any way, positively or negatively. I just remember it wasn't, even after it was over, here there was still like a lot of effects for quite a while. The army stayed here for a while. There were other things that had happened. I was never present at any of these things because, like I said, I didn't go, and mainly too because I had a young daughter, so I didn't want to bring her there, to see. But a lot of things had happened with, army coming in, and there were a lot of like little fights happening, major, I would say, not little, but scary things. And but in I actually at the time afterward, there was a lot of things happening in the community, like for healing. So, for example, like we worked at the Caisse Populaire, and there was a psychologist. Actually, he just retired last year. His name was Joe, and he used to go. He went to every organization where people worked, and we would have like debriefing sessions after the blockade, and everybody would go around, and we had a chance to talk about what happened and how we felt. So it's kind of like you got things off your mind. And so we did that a lot in the community. There were a lot of things like that, healing, that went on afterward. But I wouldn't say for me that there were any like long-term effects, or it just was something that happened. And like I said, people have to learn from these things and incidents that happen. So
All right. Well, thank you.
okay, thank you.